Meredith, I want to jump to you. I know we're going to hear a little bit more from you later, but I'd be curious to hear sort of how you decided to bring your personal story into your professional story and how that's changed the mental health conversation at work, at Zillow Group, and elsewhere.
It did not feel like a choice. That is the bottom line for me. I had been going through a lot of career changes. I worked at 4 different startups in 4 years. It was incredibly stressful. I had no idea, and I'll talk more about this later, but I had no idea why I was experiencing the physical pain I was experiencing, why I was fainting, why I had migraines constantly. And then I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. And in my return into a normalized work pattern, like finding a job where I could fit, I realized I had to find a job where I genuinely fit. And so I had to start writing about anxiety. I echo a lot of what Jason said. I think that talking about it is the path towards to feeling better with it, to living with it. And I found that in order to find the right job that would fit me, it had to be a place where I could talk about it. So that is one reason, to find a job that fits. And the other reason is social media. I had been writing about these topics. I had been incorporating them into my own social media, and every place that I was interviewing and everyone that I was meeting would want to look at that. I mean, there's no way to separate your social media from the rest of your life. And so I found that for simplicity and just for clarity, I had to merge my worlds. I couldn't put one off to the side. I love that point. I was fired from one of those startups that I mentioned. When I was fired, the person who was firing me said, "You seem depressed." And I was silent, and I remember my eyes just sort of like unfocused, and I looked out, and he was right. He shouldn't have said it, but he was right. I was depressed. And what I realized over subsequent experiences was that if I didn't understand how I felt, and I didn't understand my own narrative, just to support exactly what you're saying, that's when I was vulnerable. Yeah. If I didn't explain to someone, I get sick, sometimes I get migraines, this happens to me, yes, I fainted, it's nothing to be fearful of, they will create their own story. And so I cannot impress upon you enough the importance of knowing yourself or helping others know themselves to the point where they can own their stories, because others will make it up otherwise.
You mentioned, Stacey, certain professions or environments that have cultures that seem totally anathema to this idea of being open and vulnerable. And I can imagine some people in this room going, yeah, well, that worked for you, but you're at this level, or you're at this industry, or this type of company. And so I'd love to hear any thoughts on that. Is there a difference? Obviously there is. How real is that? How do people weigh, their given circumstance in their choice to be open? And are there first steps to take to test it out if they're not going to write in Fast Company about their experience?
My immediate thought as you asked that question was, if you were working at a company that hated women, would you say to yourself, well, it's good for you that you're in a company that likes women, but my company, we just don't like women. I mean, it is unacceptable. I really feel it is unacceptable. It is a thing of the past. It will become a thing of the past. We in this room will help it become a thing of the past. So if you are sitting at your table and you're thinking, yeah, my company is just more retro. It's just got more of a hierarchy to it. Whatever. It's time to change it. I love the point about the client focus, and I love the point about you have to prepare. And I remember feeling the same thing before I had a child. I remember thinking, I can't be a mother. I can barely get out of bed. And what I've learned is that the trade-offs are real. The trade-off to take that client-facing job that will steal your weekends for whatever reason, for a paycheck, for ambition, for fulfillment, means that something else has to go. Similar to talking to a therapist, I think acknowledging the trade-offs, that my husband, for example, in my case, only works half-time, and we have less money than other people we know. These are very real issues, and this is where interesting stuff happens, is what those trade-offs are and how we decide. And I think those are great things to get into around workplace and mental health, but I think you guys have really set that up in what you've been talking about.
I'm going to dive into a couple of things, but first, stepping back a little bit, we find when we see leaders talking about their mental health, it's often a lot easier to talk about in the past tense because you're telling a story of triumph. It was not hard for me to be like, so I was pregnant, I had depression, but now I'm great. Like, that's not really hard. It's harder to say, like, well, I think it's gone, but, like, I don't know. Like, sometimes I have these days, and I'm like, well, maybe it's not gone, or I'm pregnant again, maybe it's going to happen again. So talk to us about how you talk about present tense, stuff that doesn't have, like, a nice, neat tie-in.
As you know, Jen, in the past few weeks, I've been shopping around a book proposal. And I've been meeting with a lot of book publishers. And it's interesting to have to present information as though it's not an ongoing thing every single day. So I'd meet with the book publishers, come home at night, have a sleepless night, start itching because of eczema, stress-related eczema. And to me, that is just part of daily life. There is nothing past tense about any of this. This is a moment of a flare, and then we keep going. And that it's worth doing, again, trade-offs. It's worth talking to publishers. It's worth doing that stuff, even though there will be a payment that comes due around it.
So we called this panel Leaders Go First because of that obvious power, but it's just first. And we're talking today about culture change and about changing the conversation in our companies and cities. So I'm curious if you could tell us more about what needs to happen and what have you seen happen to take one person sharing a story and take it to a company culture.
I have this line that I say to myself sometimes, which is, I was saying it on my walk down here, you gotta be gawky to get graceful. Because there is a gawkiness to talking about these things. You can feel like you have braces and a perm when you first start talking, and you may say it in awkward ways in a parents group that is meeting to talk about meditation, and for some reason you decide to tell all of them that you have an anxiety disorder. That may happen. But once you've done that a few times, and your husband is like nudging you and like, you start to learn how to resonate with the people that you're talking to, and you start to get more comfortable with it. And then you become, ideally, and I'm not there yet, Yoda. Like, you are beyond caring about what you look like. So I say all of that to say that I have been gawky in every work relationship because I have had to say at some point, yeah, like, I work on this mental health, just even saying mental health, then they like trail away, they question, but then winning them over again. This is, as you say, you guys are exactly right, it is a relationship by relationship, a long-term work. I'm 5 years in on having these gawky conversations. Now I'm here, now I'm in front of the room, but like this does take a really long time to start to figure out, but it's so worth it. I think everyone that we talk to about these issues has to go through their own learning curve with it, and it does take time. And a lot of the information that someone who's new to the topic gets is from us, how we talk about it, how we feel about it. They're looking for cues. This is not something that gets talked about a lot, so how am I supposed to feel about it? Likewise, when I hear a question about triggers, I think that comes from a place of insecurity. That comes from a fear that if I talk about mental health, I may trigger someone. But the truth is, if you go into this with a growth mindset, which some of us are in the tech world, so we hear this a lot, but if you do think about it that way, if you think, I don't have an answer, I'm just looking to learn, I'll try something new after, then triggers become less relevant. And I think even labels become less relevant because over time, and it does take time, people start to hear the information in a different way. They are not falling into these little pitfalls of their own bias against that label.